Okay. For everyone that is virtually, can you hear me all right? Lindsay, are you able to hear me? Should be from my. They're muted, so maybe you just. Do you want to have your sound and see if you can hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we'll get started. I'll just introduce myself, Taylor Jerome, for those of you that I haven't met yet. I'm on pre-ISA. I'm a job owner in the South. Also from National Grid, we have Jenna Ramos. She's also a job owner in the South. We have Will Kern, who is the manager for the complex team, and then Eric Munzert, who is our key account consultant. Okay. And then this first group or this first breakout session, we wanted to go through our monthly group study status map. So for those of you that don't know about this is updated monthly and it's posted on our group study webpage. And so this is a useful tool for you to just come and look and see the status of different group studies, where there is open windows, and then also just kind of give you a little bit information on the group studies that are on hold behind ongoing group studies. So I'm kind of just going to do a walkthrough on this, just to show you how to utilize this. And then I can also show you where it lives, so you're able to access it. So the first tab here, this is just our key and FAQs tab. And so this up here, we have all of our different status types. So it lists out all of the statuses that you'll see on the other tabs, and then it has a translation of what that means. So you'll kind of go back and forth a little bit to this tab if you don't know what each status means. So just to go through a couple of them, there's the group study impending, currently accepting applications. And then, so if you were to look in column B, that just means that a group study window is open, but the group study has not started at that point, and that group windows remain open for 40 business days. And then there's just a please note that the group study does not start once the group window closes. And that's just due to a couple other tasks that have to occur before the study actually starts for group studies. It's located on our group study webpage. After I go through everything, I can just show you guys where you can get that. Yep. And then at the bottom here, we have our FAQs. These are just some helpful questions that we get. So if you're going through this report and you have some questions, it might have already been asked at one point. So you can come here and look at that. And then also at the bottom here, we do have a link to a survey. This is just for feedback that you can provide. We just like to see and hear what's helpful to you guys. Okay, and then this next tab, this one is all about our active group studies. So this first column here is the common study area name. And then the column B next to it is the active group study names. So it's pretty much the same as the common study area, but we identify the group studies by numbers. So if it's the first one that's occurred, it's 001, and then so on. And then this is also useful because if you scroll over the name of the common study area, we also have included a note here that has all of the associated feeders. So if you're wondering about where your application, like which common study area that it might be in, you can look at the feeder as well. And then, so how to use this, if you have an active group study or a project in an active group study, you would come here and look at column B. So say it was Attleboro 002, you would see that the status of that group study is group study in progress pre-ASO. And then if you didn't know what that meant, you could go back to the key and FAQ tab, and you would see that the status group study in progress pre-ASO means that a group study has started and is ongoing, and the ASO hold has not happened yet for that group. And then it also says that ASO holds can range from a few months to a few years. So just giving a little bit of information on what that means. And then that goes for same thing for all of the others. And then there's also some notes here next to some of them just to give a little bit extra information. So this one, the Barry Athol 001 group, this is on a non-ASO hold. And so we just kind of like explain what that hold is, and that is the SIP hold, and the group is post-ASO. And then continuing on to the rest of the report, these are just important dates that we include as well. So there's some things like the date that the group window opened and closed, dates that we requested the PSCAD models, dates that they were approved, and so forth. Different, we have the ASO start dates, and when it got approval. And then once we're able to determine a completion date, we'll also include that here. Okay. Oh, and then so this is also important for individuals that are thinking about submitting an application and you're not sure if there's an active group study. You can come and look and see that there's a lot of areas that don't have active group studies right now. And if you were to submit an application in that area, it wouldn't require one or get stuck behind one. And then, so this tab here is new. We just added this one last week. So it's pretty similar, but it just goes on a little bit further. It provides a little bit more information regarding the group studies that are on hold behind active group studies and where that stands for your project. So same thing, we have the common study area name, then the active group study, and then we have the name for the group study that's on hold behind the active group study. So it would just be the next number. And then your project, so we put this column here because if you were to look at your project in Portal, it would be in the study hold behind pending ASO hold status. And that means that your project's on hold behind an active group study. So we are currently working on changing the status just because it is a little bit confusing. So we're trying to have it be behind ongoing group study instead of behind ASO hold. And so then just an example for this one, say that you have a project that is on hold behind the Attleboro 002 group study. That would mean that it is in the Attleboro 003 group study. And then you can come over here and just get some more information on what that means. So the first one here, it just says because Attleboro 002 group study is pre-ASO hold, any project greater than 1 megawatt in the group have not yet to receive ISO New England's ASO determination, meaning it is not certain if any project greater than 1 megawatt in the Attleboro 002 will require an ASO study yet, which can change the ASO hold timeline significantly. So once the ASO hold is lifted, Attleboro 002 group study will still need to complete, and then ISAs would need to be delivered prior to the group window for the Attleboro 003 group study window to open. So it's just premature to state an expected timeline for that window to open due to the uncertainties around that ASO study. So that's just an example. It goes into a little bit more details in relation to the groups that are on hold rather than the active group studies. And then our last one here is, it's similar to what I mentioned before. It might just be a little bit easier way to locate the common study area that a project's in. You can just use Control F for that feeder, and it'll bring you to the common study area.
So I think it's important to bring up, right, that these last couple tabs have been added based on feedback that we've received from that link. So we are reading it, we are using it, and we are trying to improve the tool. So if you guys see something, send it over. We'll see if we can make it happen and how much effort that ultimately is, but we are open to continuously making this a useful tool for you guys to use.
Thank you. It's helpful, especially to behind the active group study tabs.
Yeah,
I think I reached out to Taylor about it.
Yeah, it goes a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Into what that means for a project that's on hold. But that is pretty much the report. I will just quickly show you where you can find that. So if you were to go to the homepage here and go to documents, it'll bring up our interconnection documents webpage. And then on here, we have a section that'll bring you right to our group study webpage. And then this is where the monthly report lives. And then you would just click this and it would download the Excel spreadsheet.
Yep, so it's an Excel format too, which I hope makes that easier to use and manipulate that.
Yeah.
And it's updated monthly.
Updated monthly on usually the 15th of each month. And there's also the feedback link here too. The feedback is really helpful for us as well. Yeah. Questions?
Awesome job. You raised the bar here in Massachusetts for group study information. Really is excellent. And I appreciate that added tab especially. That added tab though is what I wanted to talk about. It implies that if you're behind an active group study, based on all of those active group studies noted, everyone's indicating there's going to be a subsequent group study. Is now National Grid resigned to the fact that after each group study, there's going to be a subsequent group study of people that have been queuing up, say, for the last year or two while the preceding group study finished its tasks? Are we now in kind of perpetual group studies in these common study areas? And should we expect that going forward?
Yeah, I didn't take that too. I knew you were going to ask that. I didn't think you were going to ask this question. I think we the answer. So the answer is no, we are not resigned to the fact that everything's going to be a group study, but we are assuming, right, that if we have multiple projects queuing up behind an active group or ASO study, that we may have a group. What we do is that once we get to that point where the prior group study dissolves, right, for attrition reasons or other reasons, or we get to the point that ISAs are signed, that's when we look to open up a new group study window. We'll most likely always open the window, right? But then once we see what's in there, we'll make a determination from an engineering and a technical perspective on whether those projects impact each other and whether we need an actual group. We've had every scenario play itself out, right? We've had situations where there's 2 projects that drive a group. We have situations where we have 5 sub 1 megawatt projects that don't interact at all, and we just split them all off and let them go in different directions. So, you know, from a standpoint of should we lay out maybe a worst case scenario, we have to assume that a group will be created if there's more than one project, but that is not, no, that's not something that we're just saying, we're not just saying we're going to have a group just because. We are reviewing it before we make that final determination.
Is a minimum criterion then I have 2 projects that are going to require impact studies in that common study area that are electrically related. So I'd have to do both of them in parallel, or do you still potentially have the option of saying, if it's only 2 projects, can I do them sequentially? Or would you say as soon as you have 2 projects that are, and that could potentially be sequential ones, does that trigger the formation of the group and then automatically suck in most of the other projects in that common study area?
So it's all around common modifications. So we identify the potential need for common modifications. That's what keeps the group together,
Makes sense.
right? So that we can, one, share the cost, but two, get the bang for the buck of all those projects moving forward. If there's a scenario where those projects are sort of tied together enough from a technical perspective, we would not let them go sequentially. We would group them together and move them forward at the same time. If they were separate enough that they could move in parallel process, we could separate them, we would ultimately separate those two projects. So I'm not quite sure I fully understand how it impacts other projects in that electrically common area, right? That we would look at all projects in the electrically common area and make a determination about which ones.
When did National Grid start to do that, Will? So initially, group studies were based on multiple projects queued up on a feeder.
Mhm.
Then perhaps it evolved to looking at a substation or a transformer, and then a substation. And now we're looking at a common area.
Yep.
That seems to have evolved during this most recent SIP process of group studies over just the last few years. When did you make that transition, noting that Eversource has not done that? And did you discuss making that transition to using common study areas as the grouping mechanism with the DPU?
So I'd have to talk to the engineers exactly. I don't remember when we made that determination. To my understanding, we've always sort of been at a higher level, right? That we probably went from feeder to electrically common area, and I think we skipped the idea of the substation. Because what we have been seeing is, as we work towards lowest cost to serve, right, that there's a lot of cascading of existing projects onto different feeders, creating additional capacity, maybe where that new project is looking to connect. So we've always been trying to look at it from a more holistic viewpoint of multiple substations. Our electrical common areas align with our study areas. So when we do our proactive studies, right? Excuse me. That's how we ultimately break it down. Those substations that we combine together are ones that we normally study together anyway and provide us options to work towards lowest cost to serve. So it's always,
One scenario planning a part of that equation?
we'd probably have to take that out to the tables, right, and ask that question, how they execute the study. I don't want to misrepresent how they're executing that.
Does anyone else have any other questions around the report? Okay. Want to go right into the next one?
Yes.
Part 2.
Okay. So we'll just jump into the next breakout session. This one is around our change review form. That is a new part of the process, but overall the process hasn't really changed much. But we just wanted to walk through the form with everybody.
Yeah, we can preface with the actual change process and how we treat the change or determine the change is not changing. It's more so just how you package it to deliver it to us.
Okay, so I'll just walk through the steps on requesting a change. So first, you would chatter on your case page to your job owner with a completed change request form and all supporting documentation with that. And then your job owner will confirm receipt of that proposed change and relay those documents over to our engineering team for further review. Our engineering team will then determine whether it's moderate or significant using our moderate versus significant guidance document. And then we have, if it's a change is deemed significant, then the project will then have to withdraw and reapply or withdraw the change request. So you don't have to withdraw the project. You can just continue with your project without that change, if that's what you choose. And then B, if a change is deemed moderate, then your job owner will provide the impacts of that change relative to time and cost. And then if a customer agrees to those impacts of that moderate change, they'll be invoiced. And then once that payment is made and processed, that restudy will kick off. And I can also show where the form lives after. And we will be posting this presentation online, so the change request form and the moderate versus significant is linked here as well. Yeah.
So I think that you also typically link to the statement that defines what a significant change is. And there are two criteria. One is it's going to cost additional engineering time regarding the impact study, not initial review, but the impact study. And two, it's going to have a significant effect on other customers in the queue. And so if either one of those things is triggered, then it's a significant change. National Grid takes a very different approach, whether if somebody's trying to do say a capacity change upward versus a capacity change downward. So it's easy to go down. It's impossible to go up without triggering a significant change. Even if a project is sitting in queue behind the group study, the impact study has not changed, chart started, so there's no impact on the engineering for an impact study. And even if there's capacity on the feeder, or the incremental capacity being requested for an increase in size, will have no net effect on the customers that are already in that proposed or prospective group study area. And so I think it's unfair, given the times that we have to wait in queue, to be so sticky upward and to prevent the ability for people to increase the size without requiring them to go back. I have a project we tried to increase from 2.4 megawatts to 3 megawatts, new inverters. It's been sitting in queue for 2 years. Old inverter can't really use anymore. Want to use this new one. We wanted to go to 3 megawatts as part of that change. Before the study starts, projected to start in the January timeframe, we offered to pay the additional $600 in terms of an application fee at $450 per kilowatt. And we were told we would have to reapply, which is now a $7,500 change instead of a $2,500 change. And even though I could demonstrate that it's not going to have a significant effect either on customers, and it has no impact study effect because the impact study hasn't started. So I just wanted to note that you might want to clarify your policy that increases in capacity are always considered significant unless it's perhaps de minimis. I don't think it's fair to suggest that those criteria are actually all that apply.
Okay.
And frankly, I think the only reason why the increase in capacity was considered significant change is there's a perception that it takes away capacity from others in the queue behind me, potentially or hypothetically, without really doing an analysis or providing any justification of that. And I'd like to see that justification in writing for this project to do the analysis, because we're looking at the common study area and we're not seeing that customer impact on that feeder.
Yeah, no, I understand where you're coming from. I think it's always been our policy that we don't do increases, just period, right? So if that's not written down on our significant moderate change document, we can definitely get that.
I don't recommend that. I prefer the way the criteria are listed.
Understood.
We can demonstrate it's not going to have an effect on others and we keep going.
Yep. But I think what you do bring up is a point that I don't know that we spend much time thinking about is, it's queuing, right? So it's all about queuing, which
Technology is going to change.
Right.
In the middle of this study, we
Yeah.
may change again because technology's evolved.
Right,
So
so
I think we have to find a way of facilitating that without causing significant ramifications to the
Yeah.
project.
I think the idea of how we manage the queue and what a queue is there for, right? If you're earlier in line, right? What you do does have an impact downstream, but in a group study, those impacts are muted, right? Significantly muted in a group study. So if they're, and one of the things that we do know and are very aware of is, as I mentioned earlier, as part of this, right, that we understand projects that have been on hold for a significant amount of time may need to make changes once that project is now off hold and moving forward. And how are we incorporating those changes? What are we looking at in particular? So it is something that we are aware of and we are
A
talking
grace
about.
period would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah. I can't promise going up is gonna be something that we would be okay with, but the whole thought process around change management on a project, right, coming off hold, right, is something
Or
that.
perhaps just within a range, plus or minus so many percent.
Yeah.
Something to clarify that and to allow for that would be helpful.
Yep, understood.
Okay. Do you have anything to add on this?
I think we're good.
Okay.
As long as we pull up the forms after the treatment guidance and we're.
Oh, right.
Yep.
So this is what the form looks like. So this is new. This isn't something that we required before. But if you've followed the group study process, it's very similar to that change request form. We just don't have the group consent here. So the first thing here is you would put your project specific information where it's red. And then we just have some information here. I'll read through this quickly. Yeah, that the change request, oh my God, sorry. The interconnecting customer understands that the change request will suspend the company's timeframe for the applicable step in the interconnection process, including without limitation construction schedule. During the company's review and evaluation of the change request, including without limitation during any required study. System modification cost may be reassessed by the company, even if the scope modifications remain the same, and the interconnecting customer will be responsible for the increased cost as determined by the company. Changes after an ASO study has commenced may result in delays to the ASO study and/or removal of the application from the ASO study in accordance with the ASO's policies and procedures. And then this next section here, we just ask that you provide a description of the change request. So that's up here. You would just type in the description here, but we do have some examples here of what we would expect it to look like. So if you're doing an inverter change, you would just say something like single central inverter, manufacturer XYZ, make ABC, model 123, the nameplate ratings is being replaced with 2 inverters. And then you would write what the manufacturer, make, and model is for that inverter. And then the next section here we have, this is just a checkbox just to make sure that all of the correct documents are submitted with this. So you would want to submit along with this signed form, you'd want to submit any single line and site plans that specifically and clearly identify all requested project changes using clouding. Any other documentation for new and modified equipment in the form and any in the form and of the type, nature, and substance consistent with the company's initial interconnection application submission requirements. So those are like cut sheets, relay information, protection and control schemes, battery questionnaires, and so forth. If the company determines that the project change is moderate, the interconnecting customer will execute and deliver any study agreements or amendments and payments required to evaluate that change request as determined by the company. And so those are just some check boxes for the customer to go over, make sure that everything gets submitted. And then we just have the signature. And then, so these also live in that interconnection documents webpage that I pulled up earlier. So we have the project change treatment guidance. This is the significant versus moderate document that lives under the interconnection technical standards and guidelines. And then scrolling down. So under our expedited and standard interconnection application forms, that is here at the bottom, we have the project change request form.
That is just for group studies or for changing any project?
So this is for all projects. This isn't group study.
There's one specific for group study, and then this one is specific for regular study.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do we still click the change review button?
You
Or
can.
only message chattering?
You can, you don't have to, you can just provide it via chatter.
We submit that form via chatter?
Along with the updated documents, clouding the changes.
Yep. Any other questions on this?
This is a summary question. So if we would give a project that's under a megawatt, so rooftop study, you just change it like the burn there. And that's the only change. You still want to go through this process. Okay. And probably a moderate change. It's just that burn.
Most likely.
Okay.
Did you want me to call the manager person?
Any other questions? Hopefully it's a good change, right? We're looking at these things a little bit more like how we do our own internal templates and job aids, right? To make sure that we know what needs to be filled out and we don't miss stuff. So trying to bring that a little bit external to, right? So we'll continue to look at a lot of our externally facing forms and how we try to bring a little bit more of our own normal internal practices to that.
One thing I mentioned before you joined, Will, was that it would be really helpful to have bright, bold neon announcements of when a group study window opens. Knowing that there is now a limited amount of time to get a project in there from a developer that's working on a project in that common study area. That can be critically important to getting a customer to kind of move and to expedite the process through so we get an application that's deemed complete and able to actually participate in that group study. So somehow making that announcement that's never been available before. Anywhere on National Grid or Eversource or anyplace else. Jamie is beginning to include that information in this new thing, but it's not bold enough. It's not on the group study map on the portal. It's not on the hosting capacity map.
Okay.
I'd love to even see the hosting capacity map summary where it indicates that there is a group study window open. And when it opened, and therefore how many business days before it potentially completes.
Okay, yeah, let me think about that. I know we're making some changes to the website. I don't know exactly where we are in the overall process, but my understanding is that there's going to be more useful like banners and those type of things that when you log into the portal, right, you're being hit with information.
Black
So
and neon lights on that.
yeah, right. A pop-up you have to X out, right? And maybe that becomes noise after a while, but like if there's information. And so one of the things that I've been thinking about a little bit is how we utilize something like that to get information out, right? Rather than, hitting a button and shattering everybody, right? Whether you care or not, right? If we can provide some sort of banner or notification as you log into the portal, you can choose whether that's helpful information or not. Doesn't bog down chatter and add different things. So we are working towards additional type functionality that allows us to notify, not specifically for group study, but notify anything that's worth, right, passing along, even an invitation to an open house like this, right, getting that stuff out there and making sure people see it. But point taken, and we'll continue to look at how we make that happen. Any other questions, change, form, or?
Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy. Everybody, thank you, everyone on the phone, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, all right, we still got another almost hour and a half out there. So that questions.